The purpose of this video is to provide just an overview of the anatomy of a successful discovery call. So why are we focusing on this topic? In several interviews with sales leaders and individual contributors to look at what makes for a successful ramp when you join GitLab as a sales professional here, a common finding was that the reps that ramped fastest, that started regularly meeting their monthly quota, were those that within a few weeks' time became quote unquote customer conversation ready. They were comfortable leading a discovery call with customers so they could start building pipeline. They understood that they didn't know everything and they'll never know anything. Even some of the most brilliant minds, right, are still coming up with new ways to think about microservices and DevOps, et cetera. But folks that ramp fastest in a sales role at GitLab understand key elements of what they don't know, but still feel comfortable and confident leading an effective discovery call with a customer to suss out, is there an opportunity here, understanding the customer's needs, and beginning to put together a path forward for how we can help. I think it's important to keep in mind customer centricity, right? So with the customer success organization, I love that they've got this as their mantra, right? Of looking at, this is all about helping the customer reach their desired outcomes. The reason this is so important is that I think for successful discovery calls, you've got to really think about what is driving the customer, what problem are they trying to solve, and how does that impact their business, and how does that impact them personally? So there are lots of different ways to look at a discovery call, but essentially there's preparation that needs to happen up front, effectively opening the call to build trust and rapport with the customer, asking the right questions to qualify the potential opportunity, but also to build trust and be that trusted advisor to the customer to make sure they understand you're there to help solve their problems that they're facing, right? Otherwise, they can get information online. So you really need to make sure you're bringing value to the conversation. And then once you have a good understanding of their needs, beginning to position value, right? These are longer sales cycles. We're not talking about positioning value and going for the close on a call. Many times these are many meetings, right? But starting to articulate the value of what's in it for me as the customer to continue in this dialogue, to continue in the exploratory process to potentially partner together. And then ultimately closing. This isn't necessarily closing the deal. This is just closing on next steps. Who's going to do what, when, by what time frame? And is the customer and are you committed to making those next steps to continue to investigate opportunities? So as a background to all this, I think it's important to highlight the critical skills and behaviors for discovery calls. One of the sales competencies here at GitLab is they're all around engaging the customer. And so these 6 behaviors and skills are at play in a successful discovery call. I encourage you to think about and objectively assess, how good are you in each of these? What are your strengths and how do you continue to leverage those strengths, but also what are the things that you need to improve upon? And not only just kind of the soft skill itself, but really applying that soft skill in the GitLab environment, right? Understanding the software development lifecycle, understanding the DevOps model, and really what are the right questions and to ask and things to position and resolving objections as it relates to the GitLab environment. So prep, right? 3 key things. How well do you know your customer? So think about all the research you can do ahead of time on social, on the website, to just understand kind of what problems you anticipate that customer may be facing in their industry, given the competitive dynamics, maybe what you see through what the company's objectives are and public statements, et cetera. Then also, know your fit. How do you think GitLab can help? Now, there's no way you'll know the answer, but you should start to anticipate where you think you might be able to help, right? And you can start to think about how we've helped other companies in the same industry, right? Or you can start to think about similarities that this customer may be facing to others. And then what's your call strategy, right? Plan out, what are the questions you're going to ask? What do you need? What information do you need? And what kind of proof points do you want to highlight? What specifically do you want to accomplish on this call? So when you think about closing, you make sure like you lead with an agenda, you have control of the call, and you guide the conversation. But you do so in a way that's customer-centric, building trust, building rapport, building credibility. So for an opening, right, some of this is real basic, right? But just establishing that connection. You can see I won't read through the things here, but also really think about that with them, right? The what's in it for me. So being able to say, right, earn the right to qualify the customer. So you can say, look, hey, this is my understanding of the situation, but before diving in, right, just to explore how we can possibly extend the same benefits to you as we have with the 100,000 other GitLab users, organizations, et cetera. I want to ask you just a few questions just to see how we can help. Does that sound good? Right? How does that sound to you? Right? Get their buy-in up first of why they should devote some time to talk with you and engage in a dialogue to see how we can help. After a strong opening that establishes that rapport and credibility and trust, then look at what is your questioning strategy. And again, you should plan for this in advance, but you can ask questions about strategy, about the customer's specific needs as it relates to one or multiple specific initiatives, and then the decision process. So call this the golden stool of questioning strategy. All of these different categories of questions are important, but again, think about what information you need to better understand the customer, what they're trying to achieve, and to kind of suss out and qualify the opportunity. Let's dig just a little bit deeper. So within strategy, right, you can dig into long-term goals, objectives, which are typically quantifiable in either 12 months or less. You can ask about challenges, what's getting in the way, and talk about specific initiatives. Has someone said, hey, we are going to do this, that you can dive into? And initiatives typically have sponsors, et cetera. So for needs, looking at desired outcomes, what's the current situation? What's their tech stack today? What have they tried? How satisfied are they with their current tools? If they could change any one thing or any couple things, what would it be and why? And then what does it mean to them? So they're experiencing some issue. If that issue persists, what does that mean to them? Perhaps they're working long hours. Perhaps they're looking for a promotion, right? Or you can look at, all right, when you're able to solve this, when we help you solve this, what does that mean for you? I think it's important to recognize that, yes, we're in B2B sales, but we're also selling to individuals. So think about the emotions and the personal motivations of the individuals that you're selling to. And then decision, looking at the decision process. What criteria? Has the criteria already been established, or do you have an opportunity to shape that vision? What budget and time frame surrounds that particular initiative? And then competitors. And not only competitors in the traditional sense of, hey, are we up against Bitbucket or GitHub or some other competitors, but also looking at what other projects are competing for the resource and time and attention of the folks you're selling to. Perhaps one of the biggest competitors you fall into is this no decision, right? Or someone prioritizing a different initiative over solving for the pain point that they're trying to address here. So make sure you understand that and really understand the pain points and the challenges that are driving that particular initiative so that you can help continue to drive and emphasize that sense of urgency throughout the buying process. I won't go through a whole lot of details here. There is information in the handbook about MEDPIC, and there's a global sales training coming at the end of August 2019 from Force Management that will dive deeper into MEDPIC. But think about, MEDPIC is a qualification methodology that digs deeper into some of those questions to really help assess the opportunity. So a couple things here, right? You've seen this before. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Really make sure, folks ask me, wait, what's the right ratio of talking to listening? You should do, I don't know that there's no one right answer, but definitely more listening than talking, particularly in the questioning and qualification phase. And I think it's important to differentiate listening from active listening. And really, active listening is looking at not only what is said, but also nonverbal things as well, looking at body language, sensing tone, right? Reading the situation to where you can really understand kind of the root cause or the true meaning of what the customer is saying, both verbally and non-verbally. It's also important here to highlight the necessity of taking good notes, particularly for folks that are newer into the role, right? Take good notes of what your customer's asking, what they say, what they talk about their current landscape. You may not have all the knowledge, but as you share your notes with the rest of the account team, or you can get an essay involved, if you're able to share that information with him or her, right, she can help you make more sense of that to further suss out the opportunity and kind of where you go next. This is also critical for really getting the customer's buy-in, right? If you can play back to the customer, hey, these are the things you said that were most important. Capturing that information is critical to accelerating the purchase process. I won't go through this here, but when I refer to the slides, which are on the public sales training Google Drive, you can listen to a short video here about MedPick if you're interested. Let's move on now. So you've done your qualification, you've asked questions. Now we're going to talk about positioning value. So typically here, the common framework you can think about is problem resolution benefit, right? So when you think about positioning value, don't just start launching into speeds and feeds, but kind of recapture, restate what the customer said was important to them about the challenge they're facing. Then you can outline how specifically you or GitLab will address that problem. And then kind of play back to them. So because we're able to do X, right, and you said X was Y was an issue, then here's what this means for you, right? Helping them understand, see that vision to the solution and the benefit that we can provide. So you can probably guess why I picked this image for resolving objections, because a lot of times when folks start or state an objection, it may not be clear exactly what they're objecting to. So one of the key things here is anytime you get an objection, pause, use silence, ask a follow-up question to really understand what is the root of what that objection is about. So there are many common frameworks, right? But here's one you can think of is, first off, don't just dismiss or launch into a response. Do acknowledge that you understand the customer's the statement they make. And here you don't want to reinforce negative statements of, like, if they say, well, I heard your whatever sucks. Don't say, well, yeah, I've heard that too. I understand why you'd say that. Or, instead say, well, I can understand why product quality or whatever that is, right? Service quality is extremely important. So that I may understand, right? Then seek to understand by asking some follow-up questions to really make sure you understand where is this concern coming from, right? And then once you truly understand, then you can position a response. But before just moving on, right, ask an open-ended question. How did that address your concern? And let the customer talk, right? Because he or she may bring up another objection you need to respond to. And if they're not, many sales folks are scared to ask for these questions. But look, whether they say it, articulate it, and make it explicit or not, it's still an objection in the customer's mind. So I've always found that sales reps are most successful when they get those objections or concerns on the table and explicitly address them. Last but not least, right, always be closing. And again, closing isn't closing the deal. It's just closing that next step, right? I think you can think of buying, enterprise B2B buying is all about, a customer getting satisfactory answers to the questions they have to make a purchase decision. So what is the key next step? What information, what knowledge, what assurances does that customer need to continue to move forward? What are those verifiable outcomes that you can execute against? So you can recap the customer or the call objectives. I won't read through this, but just make sure you've got commitment. We talk a lot about the importance of asking open-ended questions to really get the customer to open up and talk. But here's a great opportunity, and when it's okay, to ask a close-ended question, right? Where you really want to make sure that the customer is committed to whatever next step you've talked to. And certainly doing all this while continuing to build rapport, thanking them for their time. But at the same time, don't be submissive, right? Show that you are a trusted advisor. You are on equal footing with them to bring them value, and then continue to be positive about the next steps, an opportunity to work together. So let's just do a recap, right? We went through each of the different stages of a typical discovery call and some of the key skills and behaviors there. We talked explicitly about some of those key skills and behaviors. And then where do we go from here? Yes, Allen Iverson, we are talking about practice. So think about it. Michelle Wee, Ben Harper, Allen Iverson, did they wake up and all of a sudden one morning were they good at golf, good at good at music, good at playing the guitar, singing, good at basketball? No, they've got some innate ability, but they practiced, right? Practiced over and over and over and refined their craft. So it's often curious to me is when I think about our job as B2B sales enablement professionals, are we practicing to continue to get better? So when you think about practice, so what are some practical next steps? And even before that, why am I talking about practice? So research has shown that when I provide this video, right, or some other training, in 30 days, you're going to forget 80%, at least 80% of what I've covered, right? And I know many of this is just as a review for folks. It's always good to sharpen the saw and just to kind of rethink about those best practices. Nonetheless, a lot of this is going to be just forgotten if it's just a formal structured learning. Really where the magic happens is where you apply that learning. And so this 70-20-10 model shows that 90%, so 20% from learning through others, and 70% is this learning from experience and learning by doing. So we should really think about, all right, how do we facilitate this learning from others and learning by doing? So here's some practical tips, right? From learning from others, ask some of the more successful folks that are making tons of money today. What are they doing well? Right? How well do you understand their best practices, and how does that differ from what you do? What knowledge do they possess? What behaviors and skills do they consistently demonstrate that you can start to pull into and make your own, right? Everybody's got a unique and different approach, but take those best practices that work for you. But first and foremost is seeking to understand those, right? Ask for feedback. Feedback is a gift. Have others observe you delivering a presentation and ask them where and how you can continue to improve. And be a champion for sharing of best practices. That can start with you for sharing your best practices, but also to encourage your manager, your team, et cetera, to have sessions and talk about what's working, what's not working. I'm sure folks are encountering the same challenges, and if you share information, you can be more successful together. And then learning from experience. So I mentioned practice. As hokey as it sounds, getting up in front of a mirror, or recording yourself and then observing yourself. And sometimes or oftentimes we're our own worst critic. So that alone, by watching yourself do an opening or responding to objections or asking questions, that can give you insights into where and how you can improve. Now, oftentimes that doing it by yourself isn't a real world example. So role playing with peers, that when they're playing you or they're playing different roles of the customer, et cetera, can be really helpful. And then I would encourage you that even once you're ready and feel comfortable and confident in starting those discovery calls, recognizing you're not going to know everything now, and you're not going to ever know everything, but you can still take time to personally reflect, whether it's on each individual call or every day or every week. Reflect on what went well and what's one or two things that you can continue to improve upon. I also encourage you to do this with your account team, right? So when you're selling together after a Zoom call or an in-person meeting, debrief to not only talk about what you heard from the customer and gain commitment on next steps, but give each other feedback on where and how you can continue to improve. So with that, I thank you for your time. Happy selling. Talk to you soon.